We are a third way through the Major League Rugby season. Where do the MLR teams stand? But more importantly, where do our fantasy rugby teams stand after 6 weeks of play? The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 10 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our league members. Thank you to the Fantasy Ruckers community members and everyone else following us along on this fantasy rugby journey in the MLR. Of course, with me, as always, Devin Vanderpool and Matt Yee. Kind of a tale of two stories here in round 6, and we'll get into that. But guys, we are on episode number 10, and we are third way through the season, and we are still here. Crazy, eh?
We're on episode 10?
Episode number 10, man, and we're on round 6. Pretty crazy.
Wow, we are right now on a higher episode than I have scored in 2 out of the 3 weeks, or 2 out of the 6 weeks. So go us.
And it took exactly about 20 seconds there to get right into the saltiness of Matt. Yeah, as you can tell, it's been a rough start to the season for Matty. Points have been hard to come by a little bit for his ruck and roll team. But Vandy, a little bit of a different story in round 6, turning things around. Also, the Utah Warriors turning things around for him as well after a big pec top after last week's episode. Yep. But man, I'm pumped up, man. It's been a blast. 6 weeks in, fantasy rugby is rolling. The system that we have is rolling. People seem to be having fun in our league. Guys, I just want your thoughts. Six rounds in, how are you guys feeling? Not maybe so much about the results, but just fantasy rugby as a whole in the MLR and how everything's played out here for this Fantasy Ruckers project.
Yeah, what I'll say is that I despite my losing, I'm just gonna skip past that.
We'll get there. Don't worry.
You gotta unleash the beast.
The fact that despite so much rugby is going on, we got Six Nations, we got Super Rugby, we got the MLR. Despite all that, I keep coming back to the MLR games because I know that I got fantasy riding in it, and I got to see my guys put up big old goose eggs.
Well, hey, that's what we said. We said fantasy rugby was going to draw eyes to the sport, and it definitely has. Matt, you are, I know, a huge overseas rugby fan. You watch a lot of Super Rugby. I get it. The talent isn't there, but it is a positive sign to see that fantasy has you coming back to the MLR every time. Vandy, as a new fan, man, how have you been enjoying it, digesting it? Sounds like you are having a blast.
Oh, yeah. You know what? To me, the funniest part is watching somebody completely destroy you 1 week. And then because, we really don't do yards yet or other parameters like that, some guy will put up 17 points and then next round put up 1 for playing the full game. And it's funny. It's funny in that aspect, but no, just having a blast.
It's fun. It's fun when it's up, and it's not so fun when it's down. A roller coaster of a season, and we're only 6 weeks in. You're going to survive the rest of the season? Are you going to survive the rest of the season or what? You here for the long run?
No, I opt out. See ya.
Yeah, no, it's been too much. But no, it's been an absolute blast. For you guys who may be just tuning in, this is a project that we started way before the start of this season. It's been in the works, and finally to put it, pen to paper and have it actually kind of functioning and rolling and being as, I guess, as successful as it has been 6 weeks in, it's been really encouraging to see. So if you're just tuning in, make sure to follow along because fantasy rugby is a real thing, man. People are itching for it. People are digesting it. People want to play it. And we only have, spots for 8 league members in our league. But man, there's been a lot of interest growing just because Major League Rugby is going on and because we have this fantasy rugby league going on as well. I think it's drawing a lot of interest to the MLR. The
good thing about this league too is all the members seem equally invested, and they're all good guys. Nobody's really in there, weighing anything down or being too critical about things that are kind of out of our control or that we haven't really addressed yet. And as far as that, everybody's into it. We're all, making waiver moves and weeks are tight, and it's just super enjoyable in that sense. And I think that helps
I gotta
experience.
Yeah, and I got to say, Vandy, as a commissioner, that's, I think, one of the biggest things for me because there are going to be little bumps on the road. I mean, I've gotten, I mean, there are a bunch of things that we'll dive into that we've had challenges on the way, and that's what you're going to get by basically statting out a whole fantasy rugby league by hand. But at the very least, though, I think everyone's been competitive. Our league has been competitive. The MLR has been competitive. So it's been a good time so far. So
that
if you want to keep,
guy is a little bit salty and he sucks. So.
Yeah, we'll get into it. I know last episode we got right into the negativity right off the top just because it was coming off of 2 hot losses from both Andy and you, Maddie. But we'll save it a little bit here before we get into it. But yes, if you are just tuning in, make sure you're following us everywhere to keep on track of this league at the Fantasy Ruckers. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We also post the video version of our podcast show onto YouTube as well. You can find us there at the Fantasy Ruckers. New episodes are released every Wednesday morning, and we break down all the fantasy results from the week prior in the MLR. We break down waiver wire stuff. We break down and give everyone an update of how our league is going, so you can tag along and just enjoy fantasy rugby in the MLR as we try to make this a reality. So at the Fantasy Ruckers, you can find us anywhere. So like we said, guys, we got a jam-packed show, episode number 10, big milestone here. Things are keeping on rolling here. We're going to break down round 6 like we said. We're going to go through waiver wires. We're going to look ahead to round 7. But before we get into that, because we have hit the third way mark and it's kind of a spot that is a good spot to reflect here and kind of think about how the season has gone so far, I want to kind of dive into a conversation here about fantasy in Major League Rugby. And we'll start off by this, guys. I know, Matt, you're having a little bit of a rougher season, and Vandy, you're trying to turn things around here. But as, I guess, 2 guys that were fresh into fantasy rugby and the MLR to start things off, just like everyone has been in this league, now that you've been 6 weeks in, and now we'll start talking about your personal teams, and we'll start getting into maybe a little bit of those darker spots. But
salt, baby.
What would you guys do differently now
Everything.
that you've experienced? That's helpful. Yeah. If you had to do something differently now after experiencing fantasy MLR for the first 6 weeks here, looking back at that, what are kind of some of the things that you would change? You know, draft wise, lineup wise, strategy wise. What do you guys got?
I would say right now, it's hard to say, 'cause if I went back, I still wouldn't know the teams and kind of where they sit. But I would say I would want less DC players on my team, and I would want more.
To be fair, no one knew that DC was going to be this bad.
Yeah,
no one knew that. But
so I mean, as far as like.
But Vandy, from like a positional standpoint, but like a strategic standpoint, is there anything that kind of caught out? I know you're kind of struggling right now with the scrum half position. Some league members have made it a point to mention to you and make it clear to you. Not that you didn't know already, right? Not that you weren't aware already, but they made it abundantly clear.
I see the 0 there every week. I
right.
know.
They had to remind you that you are having scrum half problems.
It's like birds flying around a dead thing in the desert, and like I refuse to die. You know, I refuse to fully die. But
no, they all just keep on taking their pieces. But what from that point, is there anything from a positional strategic point that you would think of?
It would be, I guess, I remember during the draft, kind of the front row, second row, even though I knew it wasn't how do I put this, too deep in points, I still want to knock it off the list. You know what I mean? Like, I need a front row guy. I should get a front row. And it seems like every week, you know, everybody picks up a front row or a second row guy. So I would have pretty much eliminated that to the late rounds, treat it like a defense kicker.
True.
And really would have focused on certain, like, scrum halves. I guess everybody else seems to have another one on their bench, but, you know, you only have one fly half. You know, most people aren't racking 2, and maybe I should have cared more about the scrum half, but everything else I'm happy with, honestly.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's good, man. And you got a big dub this week. We'll get into that. But I think the person that I really want to hear from, because I feel like there's a lot.
Everybody wants to hear from him.
You know, we talked about not getting into the darkness and the sadness too early.
Well, no.
You know what? We're 10 minutes into the show.
I said instead of starting with the darkness and saltiness in the first 30 seconds like we did in episode 9, we'll
start in the first 10.
We'll wait until 10 minutes in. So here, now we're 10 minutes in. Let's let's ask you the hard questions
right.
here. What
Hey,
would
Matt.
you change different here?
Hey,
I know
Matt,
you said
give the salt, buddy.
I know you said everything, Matt, but
I mean,
if you gotta break it down.
Let me get into specifics. Why not? Why not? Just let's humor myself. I think if we step back and we look at that draft, I think I drafted the most players that have played or started under half the matches. Fredden Palomalo. That guy hasn't even made the lineup once. I don't even know where he is. His Instagram bio says he's on New England Free Jax or DC, whatever. I don't even know because he hasn't been in any lineups. But he ain't there. All right. DeMonte Noble, where are you? What, the Guiltinis don't like you anymore? They replaced you with somebody else. All right. Ryberg.
The walking quadricep.
Ryberg.
Yeah, where's his quads, man?
Sam Windsor is, coming off.
Well, okay,
bench.
hold on. I want to get into that because Sam Windsor, I feel like has been on and off for you because he did come through for you last week and it was an unexpected bench this week. But I feel like at the same time, and kind of to Vandy's point, and this highlights, I think, a bigger issue that overall that happens, I think, heading into this season was just the notion of, I didn't realize how much volatility there was from season to season in terms of lineups and who's coming in and who's coming out. Like a lot of the guys that I'm looking at in the draft that were drafted within like the top, even let's say top 5 rounds, there are a handful and a hefty amount of guys that aren't even in lineups that were drafted in those spots. And imagine, just to compare it with like fantasy football or other fantasy sports, imagine if you were to draft a guy in the top 5 rounds and he didn't suit up once. That would be crazy. But that's something that we're dealing with here in
my
fantasy.
last 2 years of fantasy football. More like he died week 1.
Right. Well, there we go. But I think you do need to cut yourself some slack there, Matt, because I think some of it, I will say, if not a majority of it, is because all the signs and all the research was pointing towards, those players doing well.
You put the team in your bio.
Matt,
You got to play for them, right? You got to play for them.
Matt, I got a light for you. You're down in a deep cave. I'll give you the rope. You want the rope?
No, I don't want it. I got to suffer before I can get to the light.
Trade me Andy Ellis or Neal Saunders. Let's do it live right now.
Well, that's one of the big things I wanted to do. Like I think my goal at some point this season is to get you two to broker a deal, or if we bring on, let's say like Rugby Morning again, Fitzy from Rugby Morning, or any of the other league members, I want to get a trade brokered on air here on the show.
Tell Fitzy next time he's on. Fitzy, you can hear me now. You bring a beer, we'll do a deal. Okay.
There we go.
We'll cheers at the end, just like that.
There we go. But that'd be cool if you guys can get a deal. Yeah.
One more thing. This is two of the many things that I did poorly going into this. But the second thing is realizing very quickly how heavily tries matter in this league. I was going off points, but I think something that I undermined was the fact that front row, second row, back 3, fly half, whatever position, if they score tries, that might be like half of your points that week.
I would say 90%.
90% of your points that week. Yeah, I wouldn't know. My guys don't score tries, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, well, also at the same time, it is also hard to predict who is going to score tries, even from a week-to-week basis.
That's
true. It's tough. Definitely a lot to learn here, third way through, but that doesn't mean that you can't turn things around here, Matt. We're 6 rounds in. We got 9 more weeks left in our fantasy season.
That's a lot of weeks of sadness.
Man. Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot more weeks of this, man.
That's 9 more episodes.
That's not where I was going.
That's 9 more episodes of 30 seconds in of darkness.
No, that's not what I want. I want the light. I'm saying 9 more.
9 rounds until we have a big moment of silence for me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, hey, for all of you listening out there, I tried to bring the optimism, but it didn't work. We'll see. We'll try again. We'll try again in week 11 after maybe Matt can squeak out a win if he can put up more than 15 points.
There we go. If one of you boys want to, throw the week, and maybe I'll put up more than 10 points.
There we go. But I wanted to switch things up here as we move on here, but that is some good points here. I think there's a lot to learn that everyone's learned. And Vandy, you texted me too. I think even just going through these first 6 weeks and understanding kind of how it operates and the dynamics and the different strategies that you can kind of play both during season and in the draft, there is a lot to have learned even just at this point in the season that I think people are going to apply to in next season when we run this thing back. My rules are obviously going to change depending on how this season goes, but I think we're going to see people with a much more clearer plan, I think, going into next season than we did with this season. That might shake things up a little bit, but yeah, it is interesting. Now, I was going to go get into this this special rankings list that we had, but I want to break down round 6 first, guys. I think it makes a little bit more sense. We'll go through each games, and then we are then going to look back and then do this rankings. Basically, guys, who are all of you listening, what we did, because we were a third way through, we ranked all the teams 1 through 13, but instead of doing like a power rankings where we're ranking it in a way of how good each team is, we ranked it in a way where what are the teams you want the fantasy players from the most. So the top team being the team that you want, you know, you definitely want a player from that team, to number 13 who's like, you're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So we're going to get into that ranking, but I think it makes a little bit more sense to break down this round 6 because that did play into how we kind of ranked out these teams 1 through 13. So let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into that ranking here. So big week, I think, for all these teams here. Some pretty big matchups, guys. We had a fantastic, I think, what was it, a Saturday matchup between Rugby Atlanta and Austin Gilgronis, which was a really big telltale match. Let's talk about that one first here, guys, where Rugby Atlanta comes up top 29-14 over the Gilgronis. And I don't want to say that I said it and called it in week 9, but I kind of called it. I said against the better team, I don't know if the Gilgronis would come with a dub. They took until the 31st minute to get a try or to score any points. They had opportunities earlier in the game to score tries. They got penalties in that area, negating those chances. This time, that late second half push was not enough to get the dub against Rugby Atlanta. Thoughts about that game before I reveal the top fantasy performers from that matchup?
Yeah. I think you nailed it on the head. Talking like, I think a big thing in that match is that Gilgronis took so long to put up any points. A team that is supposed to be, you know, the most points scored per game. They end up putting 14 points, and you know, if any team can manage to hold the Gilgronis to under 20 points, it looks like they're in a pretty good shot for the win. But I think that Atlanta was really led by Talapusi, and he kind of led the ship. And I'll be interested to see how he does in the coming weeks.
I was gonna say, I think if you rerun that match, I don't know, like that's one of those games where I think truly, even though it's 29-14, I think it could have went either way. The strong start by Rugby Atlanta really got him off, but you know, there wasn't really any, you know, I would say it was pretty equal in penalties, but it was more favorable penalties for Atlanta. You know, I think they got 4 kicks off it.
Yeah.
I don't even think Gilgronis got a penalty kick. So I think it was like, I don't want to say like a game script, but I think if you ran that back, it would be, that one could go either way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about 2 of the top teams in the MLR. And I should say, and I should make this clear, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that the Gilgronis are not a good team. They are one of the better teams in the MLR, but they are not a perfect team. I mean, there was a lot of hype when they were going undefeated and they were rolling over some of the weaker teams in the MLR. I just said, hey, maybe we need to take a step back here before we crown these guys, you know, champions only 6 weeks in, right? Where there's still a long season to go. I'm just saying that there are blemishes in this team that may prove to, you know, be their downfall, which was shown in round 6 against Rugby Atlanta. They just weren't able to get off to that hot start, and they were always playing from behind. So
and it truly goes to show how deep this league is. Like any team can win in this league. Like there is no clear cut. That's the team. You know.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're DC. Unless you're DC, basically everybody.
Yeah, it's true.
It's fairly competitive outside of, you know.
Even Toronto Arrows are.
Yeah. So yeah, some top fantasy performers from that matchup between Rugby Atlanta and the Gilgronis. Matt, you mentioned it. Martini Talapusi, he had a huge week 6, 15.2 fantasy points. That's massive. That's going to win you a week. And for anyone tallying at home, that was more fantasy points than the entirety of Maddie's team. And then we got Mark O'Keefe with 7.2 points and Matt Heaton with 6.2. And to round out that list, Marco Jans van Rensburg, he continues to make big statements here week in, week out. He's coming off a 19.5 point performance, put 6 points up this week. And then we have Ryan Lowrens also on the Gilgronis putting up 6 points as well.
Did you guys see his try?
Yeah.
He decided that he was going to be an 8-man on that play.
Yeah.
And just decided that he was going to just go like this and just take it to the winger.
But I will say, out of all the 9s in the league, I think Ryan Lowrens is the one guy that can do. That guy's huge, man. That guy should not be a 9. I don't know what it is, but the MLR has some weird physique-bodied players in some weird positions. You got Mike Teo, who looks like a back row player playing fullback and wing. You got you got Ryberg playing, wing when he looks like he should be a center or a flanker. And then you got Ryan Lowrens, who looks absolutely massive, and he's playing 9. It's kind of funny looking at that. But yeah, big matchup between Rugby Atlanta and AG. Like I said, I think it was a match of 2 top teams, very competitive, close matchup. I think it just came to Rugby Atlanta able to coming out hot out the gates, and the Gilgronis always playing catch up from behind. So let's move on to the next matchup here, guys. New England Free Jax taking on the Toronto Arrows. 21-15 is the final score in favor of the New England Free Jax. Why don't you guys break down that matchup and what you saw? Had a little bit of snow there that might have played a little bit of play towards the end of that game.
A little bit. Freaking think it was a blizzard.
It looked chilly out there, but pretty low scoring week for all the games.
Yeah. It was.
As we're going through these games, I think the people will see that pretty clearly. But I mean, all I'll say is that watching Bowden Waka Flocka Flame put a high ball up to himself, chase after the high ball, put it off his foot again, and almost score a try. Oh, that guy is just a miracle worker. And but regardless, I mean, Toronto Arrows are, the Arrows and New England Free Jax, I think was the better team in the cold weather, and even though it looked pretty close.
Yeah, well, the New England Free Jax, they know how to put up some points. I think they're either first or second, I think, in the league right now. Let me just check here. No, they are, I think, 4th or 5th here of putting up points. But, Bowden Waka able to, put up, make those plays and things like that. Top fantasy performer, Slade McDowell, 13.6 points. And then you got a bunch of 6 points here. Joe Johnson, Bowden Waka, Brock Webster getting 6 points there. Sam Malcolm and your boy Jack McRogers too, Maddie, coming on the score sheet, I think for the first time this season. He puts up 5.3 points with a late try in like, I think the 81st minute or something like that. It was a low score match, not much fantasy stuff. Bowden Waka. I think the biggest takeaway for me from this matchup, guys, is the fact that when you're a kicker like Bowden Waka, like I was thinking, okay, maybe he didn't score a try this week. Okay, he can still, maybe he'll fall a little bit down in the rankings in our top 10, but he still puts up 6 points. And I think it still just exaggerates the fact that, yes, we nerfed kickers a little bit in our league, but the consistency of being able to put up 4 to 6 points at least every single week with the bonus opportunity and chance that he's going to explode for like a 2-try performance, I think is just so big. And I don't think anyone expected with Bowden Waka for him to be the top player right now heading into round 7.
Well,
so
to that point, I mean, if we're looking at guys like let's look at Sam Malcolm. I mean, Toronto chooses the penalty kick option so often that Sam Malcolm and his accuracy is somebody that you can be confident in, getting 5 points. He got 5.5 points, but every week that he's played, he's gotten over 5.5 points.
Right.
And I like, that's a consistent thing. That Sam Malcolm isn't going to be scoring tries. He's not a try scorer, but he's going to put up 5.5 points for you every week. And that's a lot more than 0.
And the insurance of having that too, like just the comfortable. I mean, you guys can speak on it, right? You guys can speak on the fact of knowing that at least you're going to get 3-4 points from someone is a bonus.
It's nice to have.
He's kind of like Vandy. He's kind of like Joe Peterson on your team. How big is it for him that he always seems to at least get a penalty kick or conversion? So he's at least putting up 2 or 3 points for you every week.
Oh, I mean, it's great.
Right.
The worst part is seeing if he's playing every week, but.
Yeah. But yeah, let's get into that matchup. It was Rugby New York versus the San Diego Legion. Man, this one was an exciting one. Coming down to the wire, Jack Hayden hits a
80-min penalty kick.
It was exciting. New York coming on top 26-23. We weren't sure if they were going to be able to take that one, but Rugby New York looks good. San Diego Legion also looked good. It was just a really, really fun match to watch.
Dude, biggest you see takeaway. Jack Hayden after he kicked it, he's doing that to his arm.
He's like, I got ice in my face. I got ice.
There we go. Well, I mean, you love to see that, right? You love to see it. It's awesome. But biggest takeaways, guys, from this matchup. Our boy Ko not scoring a try. He played the full 80.
Hey, he made a good defensive play. Didn't stop the try, but good defensive play.
But,
apparently he got lit up too. I didn't see it.
New York offense is sneaky when they get going. It looks like they're really clicking, especially with I hate to say it, but Hayden at 10 or Hayden at 15 or Hayden at first receiver of some sort. Yeah. It seems like him and their offense, their back line, especially their centers with Emery and Faltai, they seem to be really clicking and seem to be really being able to make the break gain line and that'll basically drive their offense forward.
Yeah, I think the fun part about them is they have that big play, almost to the same effect that like Bowden Waka has. Like they just seem every game to make one giant play like week in, week out. It's not like they do a maul down at the line and they brute force it in or anything like that. It's just every week you're guaranteed one. And you can say the same thing about San Diego, same thing about New England Free Jax, like every week in, week out.
And that's a good point, Vanny, because I think this is a good comparison because we've broken down these two matches already. So I'll bring it up here. But I think there's two types of teams that you can kind of go with. And I think this is, I should say, two types of archetypes of teams that you can go with here. At least that's what I've noticed here 6 rounds in. And this will get more emphasized in our rankings that we'll bring up in just a moment's time here. But I think you have teams like Rugby Atlanta and you have teams like Rugby New York and New England, right? Rugby Atlanta, they're going to pound. They're going to like, I mean, look at this past week. Their set piece was basically, and they've done it in weeks before and they did it last year as well. They just rode their set piece and they're not going to have those big explosive plays, but a lot of their forwards are going to take advantage of those set piece tries and things like that. So you have teams like that aren't as dynamic and kind of heavily rely on that ground and pound game, rely more heavily on that set piece stuff. You're not going to see as many, big time scores, but you're going to have consistent scores at positions that don't get it. So you're going to get your front row guys scoring tries. You're going to get your second row guys scoring tries.
Marco van Rensburg, I think that's how
exactly.
That guy gets a try a week from the maul. In that short yardage every week in.
Exactly. And that's you're not gonna get the 10.
He's not gonna
15.
blow down the field and do it, but he's gonna do it from the 1 yard or whatever it is.
Exactly, the 5 meter line and get that in for the 0.5 extra. But then you have teams like New England and Rugby New York who seem to have an affinity for these kind of explosive plays, whether that be players who just are really athletic and are able to break the line and go through and they go on those 80 meter tries. I mean I believe that's how Fuatai scored his try. He just a pick up and he gained like 80 meters I think off of it. I think that's that.
I'm pretty sure
I think it was Anderson
and ran the entire field or passed it off. I can't remember if the guy passed it off.
But at the same time, though, Rye, you look at Gilgronis, you look at New York. It's not like, the Gilgronis were able, even in their loss, they're able to do it both ways. They're able to do it both ways, and I think that's where maybe some of these teams separate themselves from the other, right?
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying.
Like if you watch a Giltinis, they're the complete opposite of that spectrum. Like when Ryan was saying archetypes, they are. It almost seems like it's no big plays. They work you down the field. They play the possession game, and it's cool to see kind of the extreme. I don't know, the extreme teams. I would say Rugby New York's on this end, Giltinis is on this end.
Right. And I mean, to Matthew's point, it's not black and white, right? Just because you do it one way doesn't mean you can't do it the other way. I mean, that's what we would love to see. And we'll mention in the rankings. You're right, Matt. I think a team like the Gilgronis have shown that they are capable of doing both. They have explosive plays and they have a pack that is able to ground and pound it. So if you can have that team, and we'll tease it here in these rankings, maybe that's where you want to pick up your fantasy players.
I'm not
from.
being a
maybe
homer.
That's,
or don't.
Does a pretty good job of that. I'm not being a homer here. But Utah does a pretty good job of doing both.
They've been looking good these past couple of weeks, but we'll get to there.
For this New York game, though, just wanted to point out, if Andy Ellis is starting, I would maybe pick up a sneaky New York forward to score a try. I don't know if you guys saw the instant replay of I think it was Carr Pryor's try, but you can see
Andy Ellis had that.
Basically like a phase in advance, Andy Ellis saying, all right, we're gonna do this. We're doing this now. Carr Pryor comes off his left shoulder. Andy Ellis passes it off, and it's like, okay, so Andy Ellis is just there to set the boys up, basically.
I mean, Andy Ellis almost got that, man.
It's true.
It wasn't part of the play, Vandy. Wasn't part of the play.
Setting the boys up.
I get it. Yeah, what do I know? Just a dummy.
But how many times have you had that, Matt, when you played? I've had it when I've played club. I've had some of the older forward guys come up to me like, man, let's do that thing we tried in practice. Let's give me a try here. We'll do the sneaky switch. I'll come out. He pops inside and we'll pop it back in. And it's like, okay, we'll set you up. But I don't know. Maybe he's just being a good guy, making sure all the boys get theirs, you know?
There you go.
So that big fun matchup between Rugby New York and San Diego Legion, tight one, literally a buzzer beater. Jack Heaton's kick coming through there in the big for Rugby New York to keep them with only that one loss. Let's head over to the Dallas Jackals versus the NOLA Gold matchup. Interesting matchup here, guys, because NOLA Gold coming out hot out the gate, looking really, really good, and I thought it was going to be another one of those. Okay, here's NOLA just taking advantage of a weaker Dallas Jackals team who's been taken advantage of all season long. But the Dallas Jackals showing some signs of life towards the end of that match, and almost making a comeback, putting in within one score and able to get the bonus point at the very least. Yeah. Did they show anything that was fantasy worthy for you guys? And then obviously talk about the NOLA Gold side of it as well.
I mean, they seem to continually have guys that put up points.
Yeah. Right? Well, the thing is, the Dallas Jackals, we were just talking about that kind of archetype where, you know, I during the game, I think they said they've made half the passes and half the ball carries, and they're down a try. Through an entire game, you made half the passes. You've carried it you have half the amount of guys who carried the ball, and you're within a try on a 32-26. Like, that means you had multiple explosive plays. Like,
right.
The problem is, if you're a bottom tier team, I don't think you want to operate like that. I think if you're a bottom team, you have to kind of pound the rock more.
Yeah.
You know, and play like a greasier form, like more a defensive style rugby. And I don't know. I think the big play thing is a double-edged sword, I feel.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this one thing showed to me is that, like, Dallas Jackals are not a team, and I mean, stay away from their set piece, or don't because I told you to, but the big thing is that, like, Dallas Jackals aren't a team that you have to stay away from their players. You know, attaboy, Vandy. You don't have to stay away from their players because they're still putting up tries. I mean, they're losing games. Sure, they're 0-6, but they have more tries as a team than NOLA Gold. You know, like, they have more tries in the team than the Toronto Arrows. Like, they're still scoring tries, and like we said before, tries make fantasy points, and those are like, when you see that, it's like, yeah, they're 0-6, but maybe you don't need to stay away from those guys yet.
Man, you're dropping some good points there, man. Maybe I should change up my rankings, dude. I don't know if I got it right now. I don't know, but yeah, no, that's a good point. Some big performers from this matchup. Alejandro Torres, he was the big explosive play guy for the Dallas Jackals. He scored 2 tries there, racking up 14.2 total fantasy points. Carl Meyer's been doing fantastic for Bing Bong Theory all season long. Another double-digit point performance, 10.6 points for him. I believe he scored, I want to say, a try, or he definitely scored one try there.
Yeah, he got
and then
one.
Eric Howard, 7.6 points. Eric Naposki, 6.8. Alex Tucci, 6.4. And then Damian Stevens, 6.2. That was a pickup by Hokie. He didn't even play him, Vandy. So maybe that's a scrum half to look at. Maybe. I don't know.
Vandy,
So
I was telling Ryan that I was scared that in our waiver segment last week that I said to not touch any of the Dallas Jackal guys that were at the top of the free agent waiver list. I thought one of those guys scored the double try, got the double on the day. And I had to look.
You're gonna come in here with heat.
I was like, oh my God, we gotta fade Matt. We gotta fade everything Matt says. At that
no kidding. So so it still stays intact here. Not that bad yet, Matt. But so an interesting Dallas Jackals Nola Gold matchup. I think there are points, at least fantasy points, to be had from this Jackals team. We'll see whether or not that translate into this week's waiver wire period, like Matt said. Let's wrap up these two last matches here, guys. Houston SaberCats taking on the Seattle Seawolves in a tight one, 21-19. Thoughts about this match?
Yeah, that was a real good game. I mean, bunch of close ones this week, which is awesome. Sucks for fantasy since they're all low scoring, but it was awesome to see.
Yep.
I feel like this week we had a lot of matchups that were like the same tier teams. Like you had Rugby New York taking on San Diego Legion. I would say those are two top teams. You got the Gilgronis taking on Rugby Atlanta. Those are two top teams. You got Dallas Jackals, Nola Gold. That's kind of a different. But then Houston SaberCats, Seattle Seawolves is kind of like a middle tier team. So I feel like we had a lot of good
very
close
similar
matchups.
record teams were going off against each other.
Exactly.
I feel like.
Yeah.
But
I think it's the penalties that killed Houston. Though they concede 14 penalties or something like.
Yeah, I mean
craziness. Like,
yeah, they still came out with the dub though. No, they didn't.
I think they could have made it a lot
easier. Yeah,
a lot easier.
I mean, it's not as close, 2 points.
But so. I like the look of Seattle's offense. I really like the look of Ross Neal and the way that they include him in the offense.
Yeah,
and he's somebody who's probably a really great draft pick and somebody who's putting up points. But
he moves around the field, man. You see him everywhere.
And he's a big boy, and he does it all. I mean, he's quick. He's not big and slow. He's able to break tackles, man.
He's pretty money from the boot too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to just talk about those two Seattle Seawolves players, Ross Neal racked up 5.7 fantasy points this round, coming off of a 7.1 fantasy point week in round 5. And then you have, Vandy, AJ Alatima. I mean, he's been pretty consistent all season long. He only put up 3 fantasy points this week because I believe it was just 3 conversions. But I mean, 7.5 in round 1, 6 in round 2, 7.5 in round 3, 3.5 in round 4, 9.5 in round 5. You know what I mean? You're just getting the consistent points. Part of that is because he's a kicker, but he's shown a lot of promise here. AJ Alatimu, and then some other players. Dylan Smith, 10.7 points for him. JP Smith, 6.7 points. So 2 scrum halves kind of leading that matchup. And then you got Martin Iasefo with 5.5 points and COC Mahoney with 5.5 points as well. So. Like you said, Matt, not much fantasy performance relevance here in this matchup, but a fun match to watch and a lot of promise, I think, for these two teams. It is cool to see that. I think my last question on this game, guys, is has Houston proved to you that they are no longer that bottom team from last year? They're competitive in this 2022 campaign.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly keeping up. Like, Seawolves are clearly a lot better than they were last year. They're keeping up. I mean, they're both 3-3. They're level, and there's definitely a lot of teams that are worse. And I don't know if you could have said that last year at the same point.
But the one thing with Houston though, they're at, I hate to beat the dead horse, but the archetype, they're on the far left almost on this one, and it's hard to gauge who's going to get the points for them. Yeah. Week in, week out, it almost seems like it's like David Coates, sure, Christian Dyer, like.
But even their backline has looked so stagnant the past couple weeks.
Yeah, it's the front guys, and I mean it's pretty hard to tell who's gonna get it in there. Like, I don't know, maybe you guys know better than me, but
no, I clearly don't.
So with that, let's move on to this last matchup here, guys. I know Vandy will want to talk about this matchup, but the LA Giltinis taking on the Utah Warriors in LA Coliseum, and I think that pep talk from last episode's Vandy's Hot Mic did something because off of that big historical dub off of the Dallas Jackals, They beat the reigning champions, LA Giltinis. Now, I'm not too sure if it's the same Giltinis team. We'll talk about that soon. But Utah Warriors coming up top, 28-19. Vandy, I'll go to you first, man. What'd you think of this match? You pumped?
You know what? I like to see? It was the defense. We played great defense. We were tackling everything under the sun. Like, I think that's, like I was saying, from what I can take from the Giltinis, they don't make the flashy plays. They almost broke down the field for one. We played good defense. They got a penalty. We got out of it, luckily. But I don't know. I would just say to be able to weather the storm we did, I'm being a homer, but we beat any team. If we play that like that defensively, we beat any team.
Yeah,
I'm
just looking at the standing and some of the stats right now, and it's like the Giltinis can't score tries.
No, they can't.
I mean, they can't. They have one of the lowest tries scored on the season. You know, and I think 80? Again they're using the old man at 10, but you know he had another week to get into it. This was his chance to kind of, you know, he knows the offense now. He should have some sort of chemistry with the team and with the back line. And there are flashes of where he looked good. But then there are flashes of where the team just didn't look good, and all these changes and, you know, I don't know if it's injuries, because I saw Rybert playing with a bunch of kids before and he looked completely fine. So, but yeah, I don't know what it is. They just can't score tries, and Utah won because they were able to put up points, and that's that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they've only played 5 games. I mean, they're down 1, so I mean that affects the try numbers a bit. But looking up here real quick, they only have 89 points for.
Yeah.
Utah in one game put up 60.
Yeah.
They have 89 with 102 against, a differential of 13, the worst differential literally in the league. Never mind, Old Glory, negative 130.
But I mean, regardless of differential, though, I mean, take a look at the Dallas. Like, let's compare it to the Dallas Jackals. The Dallas Jackals, they're getting scored on 39. Like, they have 39 tries scored on them. Sure, whatever, who cares? But they're scoring 16 tries on the season, and the Giltinis from last year, who is supposed to be a good team, supposed to have a great offense, 12 tries. You know, it's hard to see. But
I'd say the shocking thing, they have one more try than Old Glory DC.
There you go.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, it's this whole LA, and we're gonna get into it in this ranking segment here right now. But man, this Giltinis team, it is a conversation we need to have, because I think we've been cutting them a little bit of slack. I think the start of the season, we've been waiting for, I think, this wave and the look of what we saw the end of last season to show into this season, but we have not seen that yet, and we've been continuing to wait about it, and it hasn't come. But just to wrap this segment up here, top fantasy performance from that match between Utah and the Giltinis. Lance Williams looked really good in that match, 13.5 fantasy points, back row for Utah. Taz Smith, who stepped in for Harrison Goddard in the substitute role there at scrum half, he took advantage of his opportunity, scoring 10.2 fantasy points of his own. And then Cliven Lobster, 9.5 points for Utah. He looks great, and your boy, I think he might be your favorite player, Vandy. Maybe
Niall
Saunders, man.
Dynamite performance, man.
Yep,
he's getting me the Mels.
Picking up 8.1 points there for Utah at the scrum half position. So top fantasy performance from there. And of course, Old Glory DC was on the bye week, so we didn't need to watch.
They needed that, though.
They needed that week off. So, So here, guys, we talked about the round 6, and we teased into this, but we'll quickly go through these rankings here. And what we've done is we've ranked the teams 1 to 13 with teams that we would like to have their fantasy players of. And it sounds a little convoluted, but you'll understand as we start to go through this. What I'm going to do here, guys, I'm going to go through how I have them ranked, and then I'm going to list out where you guys had them ranked, and then we'll just discuss about it quickly, just a couple 2 points on here. So we'll start from, I think the top is going to be the most obvious, and for everyone it was across the board, and we don't need to touch a lot of it. For the players that we want the most of, I think are Gil Groney's players. I think we made it clear. Yes, there's the concerns that they have, but I mean they're averaging almost more than 4 tries a match. That might have lowered after this round 6 match. There's tries to be had on their team. A lot of their players score, both forwards and backs. Matt, you mentioned it. They play kind of both styles, so they're able to maul it in and get those set piece tries and get points for their big boys. But they're also be able to be dynamic in those explosive plays as well. Anything you need to add to that? I think it's pretty self-explanatory why the Gilgronis are the top there.
Yeah, until they stop putting up, massive points a game, you keep going to the guys that are scoring tries.
Exactly. Then we move on to the next one. I had Rugby Atlanta ranked at number 2, and you guys, Vandy, you ranked them at number 3. Matt, you at number 3. The reason why I put them at number 2 is they're starting to get into a little bit of form here, and maybe from a statistical standpoint, they maybe not up there yet, but these past couple weeks, they're starting to show glimpses of how they looked last season in that final, and that is getting me really, really excited. And the reason why, and I was honestly debating this, possibly putting them ahead of the Gilgronis, but the reason why I didn't is because of the fact that they don't have the consistency from both their forward pack and their backs. They tend to get more points coming out of their forwards, which I think is really advantageous. I think their set piece is just so much further ahead than a lot of the fantasy points that you're going to get from other teams. It just pushes them up in the rankings, which allows, guys like Marco van Rensburg to get so many points up there. So Rugby Atlanta at 2. You guys have had 3. Any thoughts on Rugby Atlanta? Or why you wouldn't have had them at 2? You guys had
it's just for
2
me,
different guys ahead of them.
I think I had the Legion at 2nd.
Yes.
But that's just because I have quite a bit of stock in the Legion, and they're so consistent. And I mean, that's the thing is you have to take when you're doing fantasy, you take all relationships off of the team. It's like, I don't care if they win or lose or do whatever. I care about my guy getting points. So if we're talking purely where they rank in power ranking, to me, if you're doing purely fantasy, it has to be the consistency over points for. Rugby Atlanta, they maybe on average on their 6th game might score more than the Legion did, but it's not as concise. It's not as, saturated between 5 players.
Right.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I put Rugby New York 2nd. So I basically looked at a bunch of different stats, was looking at total points and looking at number of guys that they have in the top 100 on each team and the number of tries. And then I also add in kind of the fact that Rugby New York is starting to kind of come together. They're at home in New Jersey, and they're coming together, and I think they're starting to find their form. I think they're going to continue to put points up on the board. And at the end of the day, like Vandy said, it's all about points. They both have gone through a bye week. New York has put up more points than Atlanta. They've scored more tries than Atlanta. So that's really, really what it came down to for me.
Makes sense. And like Vandy mentioned, coming here, I had at number 3 the San Diego Legion. Vandy just explained he had number 2 based on the points for. But Matt, this is an interesting one. You had San Diego down at 6. Reasoning for that?
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing that I looked at was the fact that San Diego Legion hasn't had a bye yet. So they're gonna have a lot more points than the guys, or they should have a lot more points than the guys who have a bye anyways. And I mean,
that's some smart thinking there, Matt.
So,
you went to school or something.
But also when we're talking about, I mean, the big thing that we're talking about is, who do we want to pick up guys from? So who's going to have a wide spread of players that is going to have the opportunity to score points? I looked at the average of the rankings for the players on that team, and the average is lower, which means that they have probably guys at the top that are scoring more of their points than once you go down the list, you're not scoring as many points. So yeah, maybe there's a top 5 or 6 players on that team that are scoring points. Guys like Joe Peterson, guys like Frere, exactly. And then, but once you go past that, it's like, okay, those guys are probably already taken. Who else am I going to get? Who am I going to pick up off the waiver wire on San Diego?
Yeah, that's interesting. And here coming in at number 4, guys, for me is the New England Free Jax. And this one, we differed in rankings, but I think we all agree they're kind of in that middle to, lower, like higher middle area. They aren't as explosive as, these top teams, I feel like. But at the same time, they have players on their squad that just are able to get those explosive plays here in and here out. I mean, they have the top fantasy score right now in Bodine Waka. When you have him, you're going to build opportunity for other players as well.
Yeah, but that's also exactly why I didn't why I put them below Utah. I put New England at 5, Utah at 4, because I mean, Bodine Waka is skewing the total points for that team.
Yeah, that's
completely. True. I mean, Bodine Waka is getting. They have a total of, it looks like here, 215 points, and Bodine Waka has over a third maybe of those points.
Yeah, I got to pull that up here.
So it's like yeah, maybe they score a lot of points, but is there a wide spread of players that are going to be available for me, or is there just Bodine Waka that's just running?
That's why I had him at ranked 6 as well.
Bodine Waka has 74 points.
Yeah, that's a third.
Yeah. So that is crazy. That's a very good point. Moving on here, we talked about Rugby New York. I had him at 5. Vandy, you had him at 5 as well. And then Matt with at 2. For me, I had them a little bit lower just because, yeah, they are starting to get better, but I just don't think they've surpassed. It was more so that they haven't surpassed the 4 teams I feel like in front of them yet. In terms of my confidence in their fantasy output in a week in and week out. And I mean, there were some kind of unique circumstances. I mean, that Houston matchup, you shouldn't really count because the wind was blowing like 100 miles an hour, one way. So it was hard to score any points in that match. But I'm just on the fence with them right now. They're kind of in that same tier with the Utah Warriors, where I know that Rugby New York is a better team than the Utah Warriors, but I feel like I haven't seen the best team yet. You know what I mean? So I'm still waiting on that performance to put them any higher. The next team is the Utah Warriors. You both had them ranked higher than I did, and I can see why after the 2 big performances. Utah Warriors sitting at 6 for me, but you guys both had them ranked at 4. Any reasoning behind that? I mean, I think for the most part, you guys are just confident that they're starting to score points here, and you're confident with these last 2-week performances, and that that winless start to the season wasn't who they really are.
Well, even in those winless games, they were still I think it was week 1 they played Seattle, and it was like a 30-27 game or something like that. Like, they're still putting up. I think only one game I think they played the Go Gronies and put up less than 20. Every other game they're putting up numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is that Utah, like Vandy said, is still putting up points. Utah's had a bye, yet they have more points than than some of these teams that haven't had bye. I have Seattle at 7, Houston at 8. They're still scoring tries, and that was the big thing for me that Utah had to be up there among one of the top teams.
And then I had coming in at number 7, and this one might be a debatable one between us 3 here, is that I had Nola Gold here at 7. I think more so because I see some players on that squad that I know can score points. I mean, the way Carl Meyer's been playing has really impressed me and things like that. But you guys have them at 11 and 12. You just don't like how they're not putting up a widespread amount of points here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got it. We keep harping on this. I think every show we talk about how big tries are. And at the end of the day, if I'm looking at a fantasy perspective, not looking at, rugby perspective, I'm looking at, okay, where am I most likely going to get points from? Where am I most likely going to get tries from? Is that from a team that scores 11 tries so far in 5 or 6 games, depending on if they have a bye? Or is it a team that scores 20 to 25 tries in 5 games, right? So that's the big thing. That really drove my standings, at least.
And two, we'll move on quickly here to the 2 of the middle of the teams. I don't think we need to touch. We kind of talked about it in their matchup because they played in round 6. But I had the Seattle Seawolves at 8 and the Houston SaberCats at 9. And you guys basically agreed with me. You had them both at 7, the Seawolves at 7, and then the Houston SaberCats at 8. I think for me, it can be really summed up into I'm really not seeing anything special, but I'm not seeing anything terrible. There are positive signs for some of these teams. You talked about the Seattle Seawolves looking better and improving, so they could maybe move up these rankings. But as of right now, I just see a lot of mediocre and average from a fantasy perspective. So that's why we kind of have them there in the middle of the standings. Anything more to be said there?
No, let's get to the good one. I think Dallas is an interesting one.
Yeah, and this is where I think we're going to get in. And I'm going to break this all down because I think this is where we get into the tier where these are the bottom 4 teams. I think we can all agree that these are the worst teams. I have the Arrows at 10, the Jackals at 11, DC at 12, and the Giltinis at 13. Now, you guys, and that might be a hot take, but you guys gave a little bit more slack to this Giltinis team. You put them, Vandy at 10, Matt at 9. But before we get into that, let's talk about Arrows. We basically agreed on, I don't know, they're just not scoring tries. They seem to play really slow game and a lot of dependence on the forwards. They just don't score points, which doesn't translate into fantasy. And I think that's at least what's been like so far. Can they turn that ship around? I think they can. I think they want to score, obviously, more tries through their backs and things like that. So I do expect them to improve in that area because I think the Arrows are one of those teams that are they are in a bottom 4 team. They should be better than this. Right. And then you got the Dallas Jackals. Let's talk about it, Matt. You said it. I have Matt 11, Vandy, you at 9, Matt at 10. They're from a record standpoint outside DC at the bottom of the table here in the MLR. But from a fantasy perspective, like we mentioned earlier in the show, there's points to be had.
They score points, and I mean they score tries, they score points. They have, I would say the past 3 or 4 weeks, we in a decent variety of Dallas Jackal guys saying, yeah, like I'm gonna show up on the top of that waiver list. Yep. And every week we have seen, despite losing, we have seen, a couple or one guy at least from Dallas showing up on that list and saying, yeah, I can have the potential to score tries for this team. So
it's just stringing those weeks together for said players. It seems tough.
Yeah. And I mean,
but that's something that's across the board, though. I mean,
I would
say there's like 10 guys that maybe put up outside of kickers that put up consistent scoring every week. And even out of those 10 guys, those guys are sometimes a roller coaster. So it's about who are you going to get the chance to put your hand up? A team that, that shows up on the waivers, or maybe a team that has only a few guys that are already picked up and then the rest never show up on the waivers for you.
Right. So yeah, let's move on to the bottom 2 here. Like we mentioned, Old Glory DC at 12 for me. You guys both at the bottom of the heap. Completely understand that, but I think people want to hear an explanation of why I have the Giltinis below DC. It's obvious for DC. They're the bottom of the team. They're not looking good. They're not cohesive. They're stagnant. They aren't able to put anything together. Can they improve? I think they can. I think they have the skill to do it. We haven't seen it yet. Now, the reason why I have the Giltinis so low, I do not think that the Giltinis are a worse team than, DC. I don't think they're worse than the Jackals. But the problem is here, from at least a fantasy perspective, is how can you predict from a week in and week out basis who the heck is going to play for this team?
Yeah,
you can't. True. And they not only are they not scoring points, but they got guys sitting who shouldn't be sitting. They got guys that were drafted high that aren't playing. Do I want anyone from this team? I don't know. I don't even know if a guy's going to play. I mean, Matt, you're experiencing firsthand with John Ryberg.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing, doing coaching clinics before the game. They got him on video, running around. I don't see any strapping on. I don't see any injury that is lingering. The guy still looks like a Hulk, and he's just standing there not on the field.
Nathan DeHolt, he's been consistent. Every game plays pretty much the entire game.
But there hasn't been many of that, Vandy. And you're talking about, we saw, I think, Matt Gateau for a brief stint in the very first match before he got injured. DTH Vandermeer hasn't even stepped on the field.
He's the mascot for the team,
Ben Lesage, exactly, Vandy. He's been out the past 2 weeks. When he played. He's
not playing.
I think DTH is just the mascot, though, for the Giltinis now, right? I think that's what his contract is. He changes his hair every week, promotes a different charity every week. And
it's so hard to say that because I love that guy because he's like Canadian represent, man.
No, I know, but he's moved on with his career, I think.
To mascot? Is that what it is?
To team mascot.
What? Okay, if we had to come up with it, what would a Giltini? Would he just be a big martini glass?
Yeah,
if we had to give him a suit, a big olive.
Just a drunk.
All right, they got some homeless guy pushing the shop shirt. Get off the field. No, it's the mascot.
Just feed him part of the contract. Start feeding him all the Giltinis.
But to a more, back to the ranking, the Giltinis, I guess to counter that, Ryan, is the idea of also potential.
Yeah,
the potential of when they get their lineup back together, when the guys are healthy, You know, we could be saying the same thing about another team who goes through injury and guys aren't playing. But Giltini's, once maybe, you know, Burden comes back, if like we don't know if they're injured because the information is not available. But if they're all hurt and they all come back, I think the potential with this Giltini's team is they're going to turn it around at some point.
And I agree. And I think this is kind of heat of the moment, and that's why I have it here. And I know I'm going to get some heat for this because, like I said, this is not an indication of where I think these teams are in the rankings in terms of power rankings or how I think these teams are going to finish. But I'm not even in this league, man. And I stat out these Giltini squads, and I'm frustrated for you guys, man. It like we talked about at the start of the season, this was the team that had the most players drafted from in our fantasy league. And I think they have the most irrelevant team in fantasy. Like, I don't think there's anyone right now on that team. I would take a bunch of Jackals guys over some of these guys, like at least as of right now. Will we be saying that in 2-3 weeks? Probably not.
That's
but
a fair take. That's a fair take.
There are some things.
The one thing I think will stay true, though, is Ryberg's still going to suck.
Trade him.
Yeah,
you don't want him. You don't want this sadness.
I do want him.
You don't want him. He can't play 9 for you, Vandy.
There we go. I think we're working towards the deal, guys. This is good. This is good. Keep on talking it. We keep on going. We got Ryberg on the table. We got Neal Saunders on the table. Let's keep on. Let's keep on rolling. Yeah, let's go.
Sam
Come
Windsor
on.
on the table.
For Mitch Wilson and Ben Lesage. Let's go.
There we go. All right. Well, think about it. But until then, as you guys think about it, let's head into this segment here.
Yeah,
Commissioner Yee's
but one last
thoughts.
ranking, though.
Yeah.
We got the 14th team that you don't want any players from. You don't want any players from. Don't take any players from that rock and roll team. All right? They're last place in record. They're last place in points scored. They're last place in tries. They're last place in it all. You don't want them.
We got to let MLR know. Maybe they should pop them on the MLR site, put rock and roll in the standings to make Old Glory DC feel better about their team.
Yeah, just put a garbage can as my logo.
There we go. All right. Commissioner Yee's thoughts here and now.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Gets me every time. Hear ye, hear ye. Commissioner Yee's thoughts of the league, giving everyone an update, and it was a close one indeed in round 6 of the fantasy matchups. Lads on tour, owned by JJ, beating Rock and Roll, 26.2 fantasy points over 14.1, and it was close there. You saw the Neal Saunders try there, Maddie, and you thought that was enough to put you over the edge. Wasn't quite enough this week, as
never enough.
Lads on tour had some pretty big performances from Cliven Laubser, Eric Howard, and Ignacio Doughty. Move on to matchup number 2, the Dankus Anchors taking on the Rucking Goat, and in an upset of the week, the Rucking Goat taking down the number 1 team in our fantasy league, Hokie Dankus Anchors, 11 to 10.4, a nail biter down to 0.6. And obviously, Van,
that's how you get your chirp with combat, baby. You chirp
there we
the
go.
You can't chirp the chops.
You can't chirp the side chops, baby.
There we go. It's the side chops provide all of the morale boost. That zero might not do anything, but those chops are doing everything.
Yeah.
There we go. And I will mention that it was largely off of the back of Joe Peterson, once again, 7.5 points. But I will say that obviously there were different things that could have gone into this that could have made it go the other way, but a big one was the yellow card on Josh Larson, -4 there. That basically sealed it for you. So there is that. Moving on here to the other matchups, Tijuana Hookers taking on Rugby Morning in a tight one. It was close for a while there, but Tijuana Hookers taking on Bing Bong Theory, not Rugby Morning. West coming out on top, 30.3 to 25.4. It was Carl Meyer. Bing Bong. Carl Meyer carrying his team with 10.6 points. The 6.2 performance by Matt Heaton wasn't enough. And then the final matchup of the week, Victoria's Secret beating Rugby Morning, 26 to 21.2. And it was Martin Iosefo for Victoria's Secret with 5.5 points that was able to get the job done. Jack Hayden's 9 points was not enough to get Rugby Morning the win. So that was the fantasy matchup results as of this week. The standings will be updated in our Discord board. I believe there were some big shakeups with Hokie losing. He moves down a little bit there. Rugby Morning also taking loss. He might move down. Vandy getting the dub. He's going to move up. So make sure you stay tuned.
It looks the same at the bottom, boys. It looks the same at the bottom.
Make sure you stay tuned on our Discord channel to see that update and the updated fantasy rankings that we broke down after round 6. The PDF file will be posted on our Discord channel. We also have social posts about that as well. So make sure you follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers to get all the latest details about that. And you also find the information to join our Discord channel as well on those sites too. So with that being said, I think that is about it for the commissioner's thoughts. There was, I think, a couple housekeeping notes that I wanted to mention. Hokie brought up a very interesting tidbit in our Discord channel about a potential rule proposal. And it was about the set piece bonus point that we have right now set up. So as of right now, when a set piece try is scored, so that being either a maul from a line out or a scrum, the distance goes towards the player that scores the try. Now, Hokie had a very good point. Because these set piece tries are a team effort, he suggests that the try distance actually goes towards the team set piece, not the person who scores the try. So let's, for example, if Marco Jans van Rensburg scores a try for Rugby Atlanta, let's say they have a maul at the 5-meter line, and it is Jans van Rensburg that scores the try, the extra 0.5 that he would get from the distance would not go towards Jan van Rensburg, it would go towards Rugby Atlanta set piece. So the set piece, we would get 2.5, 2 points for the try assist, plus the 0.5 for the distance. I thought that might make a little bit of sense because it is true. The guy that scores the try is not the one that's carrying the ball all the way down that distance. They're constantly passing the ball and things like that. So it'd be interesting. It might be different in a scrum because of the Vaca scrum.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, yes, the maul is a good way to do that, but a perfect example is Riker Hadding's try off of a scrum at the 50.
True.
He runs 50 meters, but the scrum is going to get the 5 extra points. I mean, that makes no sense because Riker Hadding did all the work.
True. I mean, maybe it's a hybrid rule change. Maybe it's for scrums. It's the player who picks it up, who's going to be the 8-man or the 9, gets the try distance. But if it's a clear bladed maul that drives in, maybe it is. But then
what if it's a pushover try?
True. And now we're introducing an ambiguity in it, so it gets a little bit iffy. And that's a lot of the stuff that I wanted to eliminate, any ambiguity, because it just makes things deceptive and hard, and more things that can be controversial, which is not. There's already enough moving parts here that can be a little bit debatable. So just an interesting point. I thought there was some logic behind that would take into consideration. So there are a bunch of rules like that, and the one that I've been mentioning the past couple episodes about the minutes played, just that hasn't been as accurate as I would have liked so far. Those are things to look into, and if it gets something really of note, we can try to make a change in season. But as of right now, these are rules that we're discussing to look forward to in the 2023 MLR fantasy season. So we'll have a look at that. But that was an interesting tidbit brought up by Hokie in our Discord channel, and we'd love to hear that. So if you're a league member, or if you're also just someone following along, post us some suggestions, post us some questions. We'd love to hear, and we'd love to bring it up on this show, which brings me up to my last point in this league announcement, is that we are going to be introducing a new segment in our show, and I haven't told you about this, guys, but we are going to be introducing the official Fantasy Ruckers press conference, and we're going to do that at the end of every show, hopefully, and that's just an opportunity. I feel like there are a lot of open questions that people may have about our league, whether it comes to rules or whether it comes to how it operates, whether it comes to, even just fun questions about us or things like that. I feel like there are people who want to know more about what we're doing here with this fantasy rugby project in the MLR and what the Fantasy Ruckers are all about. So we're going to post on social media a post that is going to ask you guys to post some questions and let us know what you guys want to know about our league or what you want to know in general about the MLR and fantasy rugby, and we'll answer those in our Fantasy Ruckers press conference that we'll add to every show. So that's something I thought I'd add just to engage the community a little bit, because I think it'll help grow rugby and grow fantasy rugby, which ultimately we want to do. So that is Commissioner Yee's thoughts for today. And now, guys, we're going to go into your favorite segment as we got to power through quickly here through the rest of this show. It is our waiver wire segment where you guys
quick. I'm
bring on.
Already. I don't
there we go.
Say anything.
where we talk about who are the top players to pick up in this upcoming round 7 waiver wire period. I feel like there are a lot of ways we can go about it. You guys offered some pretty decent advice, maybe last episode, or maybe some lack of advice because of how the waiver wire has been treating you guys for the past 6 rounds. But I don't know. Is there anything that you guys are changing into this waiver wire period now that you are at what you're at? Where no, you're just keeping on.
Yeah, I'll drop a front row guy, pick up a front row guy.
There we go.
Yeah,
Just
I'll drop
moves.
a donut for another donut. Same old. But,
well, let me ease it here.
Look for a
everything
scrum
that
half
I
in the
said.
wasteland, just not find one.
Yeah, we should start fading everything
I need you guys to start winning so that this waiver wire segment cannot be a venting period of how bad your guys' players are. So, Vandy, keep the wins coming, and then maybe this waiver wire segment is going to turn into something a little bit more positive. Because as of right now, it's
no. Because if I'm winning, obviously I'm not going to make waiver moves.
Nobody.
It's a redundancy in this.
I find
True,
it
fair
crazy
enough.
that Rugby Atlanta set piece was dropped
Yes.
on the back of Marco Jan van Rensburg. The fact that they were dropped seems crazy to me with the way that they've been for the past couple weeks, assisting Mull tries over and over again. And along with Atlanta, I'm not sure whether Talapusi is going to continue to go on this trend, but he looked really good, I thought, and he's a kicker as well. And if anybody needs a kicker, rock and roll, you could probably pick one up,
Yeah, let me break down it, guys, for the top waiver wire pickups of this week. And like I said, these waiver wires are going to be posted on that PDF document that we post in the Discord channel that our league members use for each waiver wire period and to set their lineups. And it's also available for all of the people who join our Discord channel to have a look at that. Just a little extra content for our supporters to follow along with. But yeah, some of the top guys here that are heading into this waiver wire. Matthias Fryer, he's heading into this waiver wire. He's a kicker as well. He's coming off of a 13.9 performance in round 6. Some other top performances from him. Week 2, he had 5 points. Week 4, he had 6.1 points. And then some low performances in week 1, 3, and 5. So, performing about half of his performance. Martini Talapusi, he comes in at number 2 available. He's number 26 on the season. Basically, a large portion of that is coming off of this past week with that 15.2 performance with Rugby Atlanta. Slade Mcdowell has been looking pretty good for New England these past couple weeks, coming off of a 6.1 performance last week. He puts up 13.6 points this week. He sits 43rd on the season so far. And then just 2 last guys here to make it the top 5. Eric Naposki for Dallas, another Dallas guy that's putting up points. 2 weeks where he's put up 5 more points in week 5 and week 6, 8.5 points last week's or in round 5, and 6.8 points in round 6. And then we have Brock Webster, who got another try this past week in round 6 that put him up in 47th overall on the season. So some names there. And like I mentioned, these will all be posted in our league spreadsheet for our league members to use. And then as well as on that document for the league members and also people who are following on to follow as well. So I feel like there are some guys in there for both of you here that I might be seeing some pickups. So make sure you guys get those in, those waiver wire claims. It's been exciting to see some of those fab battles between you guys. It's been interesting.
And remember, if I set them, don't pick them.
That's right.
You pick them.
If I set them, don't pick them.
There you go. And it seemed to almost work last week, but not everyone. But maybe that will turn around, Matt. Maybe that'll turn around. But until then, I guess that's the suggestion you're having.
That's how it is.
That's how it is. All right, so let's get into this last segment here, guys. Before we wrap up the show, let's just talk about the matchups that are coming in round 7. Some really exciting ones that are coming up. It is the Houston Sabre Cats that got the bye this week. So they will not be playing in round 7. So make sure you take out all of those players out of your fantasy lineups. But some matchups that we have for this week as we break it down. Utah Warriors taking on, Vandy, your hometown Toronto Arrows. So there might be a little bit of a split of supportship there. But I think you're going to be going all the way with Utah Warriors. Who cares about the hometown Toronto, right?
Or are they the Tilsonburg Arrows?
Oh,
True. Okay. I shouldn't be lumping it. That's my
I,
bad.
yeah, I think Utah's got that one in the bag. So didn't worry.
Hey,
about it,
it's sports. Shut your mouth.
And then we got LA Giltini, San Diego Legion. Vilgroni's taking on the Free Jax. That's going to be a fun matchup. Dallas Jackals taking on the Seattle Seawolves. Nola Gold against Rugby New York. And out of the bye, All Glory DC's got a tough one against Rugby Atlanta. Not too sure if they're going to be able to get into the win column there. But who knows? Like Vandy said, it is sports and anything can happen. But out of those 6 matchups this week, I feel like there's a pretty obvious one that everyone is looking forward to, with maybe one on the back burner. But what are you guys looking for in round 7?
Well, the obvious front runner is the Gronies Free Jax, but
yeah,
I honestly think the Dallas Jackals Seattle Seawolves game is going to be good. I think that's got a recipe for a good game. I honestly do.
I agree, and I
think Giltini's kind of get smoked by the Legion a bit.
Hey, but also to me, it's like I'm thinking, all right. Is this the week Giltini's guys are going to come back?
That could be it too.
Are they going to come back and play against San Diego?
The Legion's not great on defense. They're pretty shit on defense.
So
that's what I was saying, is that like, man, like at any point in time, we don't know, is that these Giltini's players could all come back and they could be the same team that they were in the final last year. Who knows? But we won't know that.
They come out to like the Purge music, and it's like, we back,
like,
baby.
I'm just picturing like all the Giltini stars. Like I'm picturing like Gateau, DTH, Ryberg. They've all been just sucking back like martinis and Giltinis. They've all been enjoying the LA lifestyle. They came over here and they're like, oh crap. We're at the bottom of the table. Okay, you know what? Let's turn it on now. We're gonna show up here against the Legion and let's dress. I would not be surprised if that's the thing, but I don't know. That was what I was saying on the back burner. If all the Giltini's guys, it doesn't have to be all of them, but at least a good portion of the guys that we know are their top guys dressed up this weekend, I do think the Giltini's matchup versus the San Diego Legion is going to be fun. But that's if the team, at least a partial of the team that we know the Giltini's to be, shows up this weekend. But what players are you starting this week? What players are you sitting in terms of teams? Are there any teams that you're targeting in terms of starting guys? Maybe Seawolves players might be good. Rugby Atlanta players taking on DC.
Rugby Atlanta players are all the way.
Plus or minus here, I'll do this. Plus over under 2 set piece tries from Rugby Atlanta.
Under.
I'm taking the over.
Over. Okay. Over and under. All right. Well, I will revisit that in the breakdown next week. So Vandy over 2 set piece tries.
I'll bet you $10 right now.
No, I can't. I'm already giving way too much money to charity.
Let's get like a nice friendly bet. What about like a drink or something, or
charity? I'll add it on to the end.
All right. So
okay.
we'll revisit that next week. Over Vandy 2 set piece tries. Matt under. That'll be interesting. But yeah, I do think everyone this week got to be starting your Rugby Atlanta players. And hey, I wouldn't even side against you. People might want to be starting their Utah Warriors players as well,
and possibly Rugby New York players.
Yeah, against the Nola Gold, that too as well. So I think those are the top 3 teams there that I think that'd be starting. But it should be an exciting one. I think we got spoiled with a lot of really, really good round 6 matchups. This one I'm not as excited about in terms of how many solid matchups we have, but it still should be another fun one.
High scoring matches. That means maybe some good fantasy matchups, high scoring fantasy matchups. So we win either way.
Fair enough. That's a good point. All right. Well, as we wrap up this show, I think it wouldn't do it justice if we didn't give the opportunity to Vandy, who has been taking heat week in and week out, getting beat on in this fantasy league, but it didn't matter. And it didn't matter in round 6. He was able to get the big dub that he needed, not only against another fantasy team that is also struggling, not against a fantasy team that didn't decide to set their lineup, but a fantasy team that was heading into round 6 at the top. And Vandy was able to take the dankest anchors down. We mentioned it earlier in the show, and we're mentioning it here now. And I got to give an opportunity for Vandy to get on his hot mic and talk about what a big week it was for him in round 6.
Yeah, I'd love to sit here and make this one about Utah, but it's against the Arrows, and like I said, it's sports. I don't want to say it's in the bag, but I'll be sick next week if we lose because I'll still be throwing up. But anyways, Hokey, I got to say, buddy, when you point fingers, 3 are pointing back. Don't chirp the sideburns again or you'll feel it. You know what? Sometimes I'd show you, but it's in a profane spot, but I have a Dragon Slayer tattoo, and it's for days like today. You know what? It just feels good. It feels good to take down the top, and once again, I should have 3 wins if it wasn't for the other week, but peace, love, and easy dub next week. Let's go.
There you go.
There
Hey,
you go.
Danny,
Keep
maybe
on
you
rolling.
should send Hokie some rugby videos just to show, give him some
I'm gonna
knowledge
grow
on
up
rugby.
right
you know,
here. That's it.
now that you beat him.
Yeah, send
But yeah,
him this.
Vandy, I also would have had 3 other wins if I scored more points. Than the
I
other team.
did. I scored more points than everybody and lost. Because, well, okay.
Matt is not having it. But hey, with that, we'll see. We'll see whether or not the Utah Warriors can keep it going with after Vandy's big pep talk. We'll see whether or not Vandy can keep it rolling here after a big upset win against Anchors Anchors. We'll see whether or not he can continue the win streak going. We'll see whether or not Matt can get into the win column after losing 2 in a row here. Man, so many storylines heading into round 7, and not to mention that bet as well. Will Rugby Atlanta get over or under 2 set piece tries? We'll figure out, and if they do or don't, it doesn't matter. More money will be going to charity.
Weekly charity bet. Let's start it.
With that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to tune in next week for the Fantasy Ruckers Show. We will be back.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.